I'd like to welcome to the show David Trott. Good morning. How are you this morning, sir?
Good morning, Richard. I'm doing great.
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great. You can hear me okay? I'm at the Detroit airport getting ready to fly out of town, so I'm glad we could connect. So
beautiful. Well, we'll keep it quick and brief, given that you're at the airport, and we don't want you to have to be sprinting down the airport hallways there. So, well, listen, thanks for taking the time to join us. You had a great op-ed that was part of our Heartland Signal platform, and you've got something to say about what the Trump tariffs would represent to consumers when it comes to this platform that he wants to put in place if he gets reelected.
Yeah, the tariffs that Trump is proposing are a terrible idea. They're going to, slow the economy and cause inflation and really hurt the middle class. And that in itself is problematic. What's even more kind of insulting, frankly, is it's just a gimmick, right? He just makes up stuff on the fly, and whatever he thinks will make him seem like he's strong and tough, he'll throw out there. So he's going to hit China with a 60% tariff. And if you don't think China's going to retaliate, well, first, he'll never do what he says. But even if he did it, he doesn't even want to discuss how China's going to retaliate against our economy. So the whole thing's a bad idea, and I'm not sure he even understands what he says,
Why is it that there are members of the GOP that haven't called it out like you have?
Well, I mean, the GOP today is not a political party. It's a cult, right? It's a cult, and people are afraid of being primaried. That's a verb now, to primary. And they're worried about being primaried and losing their jobs. And so the whole party today, with Trump as their leader, just lacks the courage to describe policy the way it is. I had a conversation over the weekend about John McCain, and whether you like what McCain stood for or not, at least he told you what he thought.
He definitely did, and to that extent, I like a lot of what John McCain stood for. And the number one thing that he stood for was protecting democracy. And so, if we could start there, and then we can build around that. And some things we are going to agree on, and some things we aren't. But So when you were a member of the House Services Committee and Foreign Affairs Committee, what were some of the things that you were able to get done that were actually, policy-driven things that have helped out the country?
Well, I worked hard. I had a large Armenian population in my district, so when I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee, I worked hard to get what happened in Armenia in 1915 called a genocide. It didn't get across the finish line of the Senate until I had left Congress, but I worked hard to try and advance that resolution. In largely the Foreign Affairs Committee, we were kind of a watchdog over some of the foreign policy coming out of the executive branch. And in the Financial Services Committee, I passed a couple bills trying to simplify some of the regulations surrounding home ownership to make it a more streamlined process for consumers. And we simplified some aspects of Dodd-Frank that maybe had some unintended consequences.
You've been really and truly, and this is a word that I know sometimes rubs people the wrong way, but you've really been more of a centrist, both when you were as a congressman, but also just in general with a lot of the things that you've worked on and the policies that you stood behind. What's driven you or put you in that kind of direction as a political leader?
Well, most members go to Washington and they come back home every other week and they talk about what they've stopped from happening. And I just don't think that's why we were sent there. It would be a much different dynamic if people came home and were expected to talk about what problem they tried to solve. And so the way you solve problems in Washington, you have a House that's typically only controlled by a few seats, and you got the filibuster in the Senate. The way you solve problems in Washington is the way our founding fathers envisioned it would occur, which is through compromise. And, for our democracy to work well, you need compromise, which the far right and the far left won't allow it to happen. And the other thing you need forbearance. Yep. And that's a very interesting concept. Forbearance is where the party in power can't use all of its power to try and crush the minority. because when they're out of power, they're just going to have the same thing come back and happen to them. And I believed in that, and I think our leaders need to be more moderate so we can try and come up with bipartisan solutions that will stand the test of time.
Do you think that the filibuster is one of the reasons I'm sorry, I'm going to merge the thoughts on filibuster and forbearance. Are they causing the problem, or are they not causing the problem, but are they making the problem worse?
Well, I think the forbearance, that's a very interesting question, Richard. I think in the Senate, I think the filibuster probably leads to some level of forbearance and certainly leads to some level of compromise because 60 votes is a high threshold. In the House, it's a completely different situation, and there is no forbearance whatsoever, and there is no compromise.
Got it. Okay, because that's created then further away politics, not even close to how John McCain tried to negotiate. Just to use him as an example, based on what you were saying about your conversation. So,
right.
Let's. You mentioned the word gimmick earlier with regard to Donald Trump. What is it that's attracting people to the gimmicks? Because there's a lot of them that he's thrown out there.
Yeah, boy, I think a social scientist could spend a long time studying that. It just flummoxes me beyond comprehension why people are drawn to the MAGA movement. He's as an individual, he's psychologically, morally, intellectually, and emotionally unfit to be president. And so if you start from that standpoint, then when he throws out, he doesn't read, right? That's why intellectually he's not fit to be president. He doesn't read, and he doesn't think there's anyone that knows anything more than him, so he doesn't listen to his advisors. So he throws out these half-baked policies like his tariff proposal. And people just, I think, are drawn to him. To answer your question, I think people are drawn to him because they're on some level frustrated with their own lives, and they blame immigration for all of their problems, perhaps in their career. And this America First concept means that we've got to be strong and make sure that no country takes advantage of us, and therefore these tariffs sound like a pretty good solution.
So that there's a little bit of nationalism in there, would you say, in addition to dissatisfaction with their own lives?
There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Yep, no question about it. And the world economy is to blame. And, I got a news flash for everyone. I mean, Donald Trump's not going to be able to stop the world economy from happening, right?
No, I think that we're far down that road. And this is probably a hard question to answer, but world economy, I see it as a good thing for all of us because we live beyond borders or inside of borders, but we don't see, I don't think we can survive just living that way. Is that a fair statement?
No question that's a correct statement. We need the world economy. We benefit from the world economy, and there's nothing wrong with approaching nations that aren't playing fair with us and stealing our intellectual property like China does, and trying to level the playing field. But I'll tell you one thing, you don't do it at a press conference, you do it behind closed doors. And that's one thing that Trump claims in his first term, that he was very successful in negotiating with China. And if you talk to any economist, they'll tell you the exact opposite happened.
Yeah, and that became one of those let's point fingers at another country. In this particular case, let's point fingers at China. So take a couple more minutes before we wrap up to just share with us your give us a quick education on what tariffs actually mean to the U.S. if Donald Trump were to get reelected and raise them by what he says 10% or potentially 20%.
Well, I think the tariffs, I think that one economist estimated that the tariffs that Trump proposed are tantamount to about a $300 billion tax, mostly on the middle class, cost the average middle class a couple of $1,700 a year. And, the thing that Trump either doesn't understand or won't answer because he doesn't want to, but who's going to pay the tariffs? The assumption in his plan is that some foreign manufacturer or some foreign government is going to pay the tariffs because they still want their products shipped into the United States. And it's possible that some foreign manufacturer will have a little less profit margin to be able to ship to the United States. But in reality, at the end of the day, it's the American consumer that's going to pay the tariff and the tax, and it's going to hurt our economy in the process. So, that's the result of the tariff. And again, if I'd have more respect for his policy if I thought it was well thought out and he had a team of advisors behind him giving him good advice on how to level the playing field on trade. But we all know it's just something he made up, sitting on his plane because someone said, yeah, that's a great idea, and that'll sound tough. And it's just so shallow that it's insulting.
Do you think that Vice President Harris has a better understanding of what tariffs will represent to the country?
No question she does. And there's also no question that she'll be surrounded by serious advisors who will give her good advice when she's considering policies like tariffs. And Trump is going to be surrounded by felons, right? That's assuming, of course, Steve Bannon gets out of jail in time and can join the administration. So,
I love the sarcasm, but you're right about that. Sarcastic, but unfortunately, a threshold that we could hit. So on the point about Vice President Harris and surrounding herself with quote unquote smart people. If you saw the interview she did a few weeks ago with Dana Bash, the question came up about her cabinet. How did you feel? What are your thoughts about her having someone that, quote, is a Republican as a member of her cabinet, if not more?
Well, it's well-established policy. President Obama had Ray LaHood as the Secretary of Transportation, and I think Eisenhower kept around a Democrat from the Truman administration. It's well established, and again, that's kind of goes back to the whole Lincoln, team of rivals concept, which is, you don't want a bunch of yes men and women sitting around the table in the cabinet room and saying how great you are. You want people to challenge your policy, and that's one of many flaws on Trump was, no one can challenge his policy. They have to. I have a good friend who got a job in the first Trump administration. He was in Congress with me, and I asked him how he ended up in this job that he really wasn't qualified for, and he said he was the one that playing golf with Trump who told him that he should be on Mount Rushmore. and Trump was so enthralled with that idea that he asked the guy what job he wanted in the administration. This is a high-level job, too. I'm not going to rat out my friend. But this is a serious cabinet position, so that, Vice President Harris is going to be surrounded by people that are qualified who will give her honest feedback. And she's been around long enough that she understands the implications of some of the policies that will hurt the middle class.
Well, and that's the thing that I think is really to be applauded for where you are in writing this article for Heartland, is that you're pointing out numerical fact, you're pointing out some social impact, and there's no partisan to that. It's just, here's the data. This is how it will impact all of us. And you seem to have figured out that all of us means whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, it's going to hurt. If it's going to hurt anybody, it's going to hurt all of us. And that's what's appreciated. One last question. Going back to something you just said about Vice President Harris. What do you think, or what's your observation about people that are saying that they're still undecided or uncommitted voters, given where you are in terms of the state that you're a former representative of, and where you are born and raised? What are your thoughts about undecided, uncommitted voters? What are they looking for?
Well, it's pretty well established that a lot of voters don't really focus on the election until the last 30 or 60 days. That's why, so many countries around the world have a better system than ours, which, allows for a very condensed election cycle. I mean, we've been getting hit with commercials on politics and campaigns here in Michigan for several months now, right? And the whole election comes down to 5 or 8% of the voters in 6 states now, right? So they're going to spend several $1 billion trying to convince 5% of the people in the country to vote a certain way, and those folks won't probably start paying attention until the last 30 days or so. So I think that's the reason for all the undecided voters, but they'll start focusing, and again, I think they're going to focus on Vice President Harris because you really would have to have been living under a rock for the past 10 years if you didn't really have an opinion on Trump, right? So And that's why, Vice President Harris wanted to do another debate, another chance to introduce herself to the American people. And but she'll have plenty of opportunity through her TV buys to do that. But at the end of the day, I think Trump is going to be unable to be a serious candidate. He does it in every one of the debates for about 10 minutes, and then he reverts back to crowd size and hand size, and that's all he can talk about. And so at the end of the day, the next 30 days will bode well for Vice President Harris because she'll come across as a serious candidate with solutions for our country.
That's exciting to hear. So what's keeping you busy? What's keeping you active these days?
Well, I agreed to teach. I agreed to teach a college class down in Florida every Monday afternoons. So I've been flying back and forth every week to teach 30 undergraduates a pre-law class, and then we have some exciting real estate projects. But what's mostly keeping me busy is we have 3 grandkids under 2, so we're running around covering that, which is it's really hard work. I must tell you, it's tougher than being in Congress.
You got the roller skates on all the time. Is that how it works?
Yeah. And our little 8-month-old grandson, his favorite thing to do is to give you headbutts. So you got to be alert. So.
Right, because you're sitting there having a nice glass of wine or a glass of water, or taking a bite of food, and he decides it's headbutt time. So
right. So, anyway.
Well, listen, David, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for the article. It's a phenomenal article, and I'm going to be speaking it up so people have a chance to read it again and again. I know you're traveling, and I know how that is, so I don't want to keep you any longer. Travel safely, and we'd love to have you back in the future to talk about things that you're working on. And I appreciate that you're doing the work to help the students who are coming to your class this afternoon. So,
Great. Okay. Well, great talking with you, Richard, and I appreciate being on your show and love to talk to you again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Be safe. We'll talk with you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye now.